October PSTA meeting to order. And Commissioner Justice, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. First of all, we'd like to offer an opportunity for public comment on consent agenda items or any other topic not on today's agenda. For those who would like to speak about any action items, we'll give you the opportunity when the item is discussed. Please fill out a green card and give it to Rachel at the front desk, please. Okay, thank you. We'll move on. PSTA has recognized nationally for its workforce development initiatives, especially the creation of its leadership development program called Leadership PSTA. It gives me great pleasure to invite Ms. Tamika White, who manages Leadership PSTA, to recognize this year's Leadership PSTA class and to introduce next year's class. Tamika? Good morning. Good morning.
Oh, Chair Long is not here, so good morning, esteemed board members. My name is Tamika White. I'm the Senior Organizational Development Manager in our HR department, and it is truly my pleasure to be here with you this morning to share the story of our third successful year of our in-house professional development program, Leadership PSTA, and to present to you our amazing graduates from the class of 2019. I do want to start by saying thank you to the board, our CEO, Brad Miller, and our Director of Human Resources, Trish Collins, as well as all of the other executives here at PSTA. It is truly because of your guidance and support that this program continues to thrive and be successful. If you recall, this premier program is a part of our long-term succession planning strategy. So as we have future staffing changes, we're prepared with a pool of talent ready to be considered. Other benefits of the program include exposing our emerging leaders to more organizational knowledge and a broader view of the transit industry. The program also emphasizes cross-departmental collaboration, which is great for breaking down silos and building professional networks. The organization benefits from having stronger leaders as it has a direct impact on our rates of employee engagement and retention. The class of 2019 stepped up to the challenge and began their leadership development journey last January. They've been working hard for the last 10 months to improve both personally and professionally. The participants experienced a rigorous curriculum of development opportunities, such as team building, facilitated classroom content in targeted skill areas such as communication, delegation, strategies for influencing others, and driving change. They also were able to meet and learn from distinguished leaders from inside and outside of PSTA and had opportunities to put their learning to practice right away through group and individual projects, which resulted in tangible improvements in our organization and in the community. Some of the key outcomes this year include the fact that all 6 have certainly emerged as stronger, more confident leaders and experienced career growth. We've increased our interdepartmental collaboration across the agency and established a new community partnership with Feeding Tampa Bay. The purpose of the Community Impact Project is for the participants to work as a team and to extend their newly acquired skills beyond the agency's walls and make a positive difference in the lives of our customers and the community we serve through transit. It's also important as leaders to give back, because we know that truly effective and inspiring leaders aren't just driven to lead people, they must also be driven to serve them. I'm very proud to congratulate our Leadership PSTA graduates. They have excelled in the program and have demonstrated the growth and development that we certainly knew they were all capable of. At this time, I'd like to present to you the graduating class of 2019 and invite them up to tell you a little bit more about their Community Impact Project. Please welcome Angeli Baker from Procurement, Bonnie Epstein from Planning, Kessia Harris from Maintenance, Mia Kabigting from Marketing, who's actually not present today, and Terry Evart from Customer Service.
morning, board members. I'm Angela Baker, and I'm a purchasing agent here at PSTA. Who knew this little seed planted by Darden Rice, when she came and talked to us our very first day about food deserts in Pinellas County, would skyrocket our partnership with Feeding Tampa Bay to make the front page of the Tampa Bay Times and covered by 4 television stations. You may have even seen our bus wrap traveling around town, and that was designed by our own Mia Capeting. The incredible program not only challenged us to lead, but we also learned we have an amazing network of support from everyone, from our own board members, Heather Gracie and Vince Cox, and from every director and chief, including Brad, and from volunteers from every division within PSTA. And we had volunteers even from our bus operators, so we're very excited. We're very proud to serve the community the PSTA way. So now let us provide you a brief summary of what we did and what is still to come. And I'd like to introduce Mark Knight, who's going to tell you about the community impact and also some highlights of the event.
Good morning, board members. My name is Mark Knight. I'm the Construction and Development Manager for PSTA. As Angela mentioned, due to the seed that was planted, Leadership PSTA hosted the first transit food pantry on July 30th. We provided the event space. We had 30 volunteers, nearly 400 shares on social media, and a custom text message reaching about 9,800 subscribers. Due to the large turnout showed just how much need there is in Pinellas County and how PSTA connects the riders to the food that they need to feed their families. After Feeding Tampa Bay arrived, we began setting up the food line with meats, vegetables, fruits, dry goods, and drinks. Due to the hot weather that day, we provided cool drinks and a cooling bus for those that stood in line. We had a great event that day, and now I'd like to turn it over to Bonnie Epstein.
Good morning. My name is Bonnie Epstein. I'm a senior planner at PSTA, and I'll be talking a little bit about the results from our event. So Feeding Tampa Bay always does surveys at all of their events, and we did surveys with both PSTA and Feeding Tampa Bay staff. But we added additional questions asking how people got to the event and how they heard about it, because we were interested to see if we were able to pull in a different group that usually attend these type of events. Because Feeding Tampa Bay is limited in where they can host these events due to space and finding locations that would be willing to host such a large event. So this leads to a lot of events being held at remote locations where someone needs to drive. So if someone doesn't have a car, they need to count on borrowing one or getting a ride from a friend or family member. So this Feeding Tampa Bay event was different because not only did we put it in a location that was easy for bus riders to get to, our own PSTA lay-by, a transfer center with many high ridership routes, we did a lot of marketing directly to our bus riders. And our results really showed that this event was successful in bringing in a different set of people, with 71% of attendees having not been to an event like this in the past year. 55% of the attendees rode the bus to the event, and 58% of attendees heard about the event through PSTA and riding the bus. So we had over 188 surveys completed, but there were well over 200 people in line. And based on the number of people in each attendee's household, this event was able to help feed over 500 people in the Pinellas County community, which I think is pretty great. And now I'll turn it over to Kessia Harris, who will talk about lessons learned from the event.
Good morning, board members. My name is Kessia Harris, and I'm with the Maintenance Department. We experienced some lessons learned throughout the planning process for the Community Impacts Project, as well as on the day of the actual event. I will highlight just a few of these lessons learned. We gained some negotiating skills while formulating a partnership between the Feeding Tampa Bay and PSTA. We learned some team building and conflict resolution strategies. We learned how necessary it was to be deliberate leaders who delegate tasks while focusing on the bigger picture. On the day of the event, we did a pretty good job with crowd control by having proper signage and several volunteers to help direct people and vehicles. And because our aim was mainly to target our bus riders for this mobile food pantry, distributing tote bags to carry back to the lay-by was a convenient way, and it actually worked out. Thank you.
Morning, board members. My name is Terry Evard. I'm the Superintendent of Customer Service. As the Class of Leadership 2019, we'd like to thank you for your support all year long. We would also like to thank those who came out to the event of Feeding Tampa Bay for the very first one, and invite you all to come out for the following dates. The dates we have next is December 3rd. We do expect that one to be a little bit bigger than the first one now that people know about it. The one after that would be March 5th, and then we have another one at May 5th. I'm sorry, March 3rd and then May 5th. We have a flyer at your seat as a reminder and hope to see you there. And just an extra word here, we also have extra t-shirts if anybody wants one. Thank you.
Congratulations and great job, Class of 2019. I'm also thrilled to have the opportunity to announce to you at this time our incoming class for the Class of 2020 Leadership PSTA. We have some amazing individuals joining this cohort. At this time, I'd just like to ask them to stand and be recognized as they call their name. We have Emma De Jesus from our Mobility Department, Larkeisha Burr from Customer Service, Julie Cagliostro is our Director of IT. We have Michael Hansen, our Director of Finance, Michael Hetrick, our Assistant Project Manager, and Tom Hayab, who is a Transportation Supervisor. Welcome. And this is the beginning of your journey. I know you're going to do great things. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you very much, and congratulations to all of you. Thank you. I'd now like to shift to our Transit Riders Advisory Committee, and Ms. Elizabeth Olden will give the report.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Vice Chair Barkley, Mr. Miller, and esteemed board members. The track team met on October 15th, 2019. Nicole Dufva, PSTA's public engagement planner, reminded committee members of the October service changes, which took effect on Sunday. Ms. Dufva encouraged track members to assist with public outreach in advance of the service change by volunteering to ride the CAT or the Park Street and Grand Central Transit Centers. Ms. Dufva also invited track members to attend or volunteer at Open Street St. Pete event that was held this past Sunday at Alpert Whitehead Park in downtown St. Petersburg in partnership with Car Free St. Pete. During member comments, track riders specifically complimented the new time point signs displayed throughout the system. These signs have a great impact on operators to improve on-time departures and help riders catch their bus. One rider also complimented operators for their patience, kindness on the bus. She recently injured her ankle and needed additional assistance to board the bus. As a user of mobility device, which I'm sitting on, and someone who also needs additional assistance, I, of course, know how kind operators can be. It's nice to know that a fellow rider experienced and can appreciate how good our drivers are. The next track meeting is November 19th at 4 p.m. And as always, board members are welcome to attend. Thank you.
Very much, Ms. Olden. Okay, our next report will come from Commissioner Eggers regarding Forward Pinellas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a really good meeting, actually, with some prodding from my fellow members. We actually got done at an early time instead of the late 4:30 time. So I was glad about that. But I just have a brief summary that I'd like to go over with you from our October 9th meeting. We had our final update of the Advantage Pinellas Plan adoption that we will be adopting at the November meeting. The board approved opening the draft plan for public comment. So 3 things of note. In the history of Pinellas County's long-range transportation plan, it's really the first time that transportation TMA funds directed by the MPO have been fully flexed to non-roadway improvements. So that's a change. The TMA funds include $1 million to complete streets, $1 million annually to technology, $2 million annually to transit capital projects, including bus replacements at PSTA. The TMA, excuse me, and then the draft cost feasible plan is available on our website, so you can take a look at that. I think we are receiving comments through November 12th. Second thing is the Florida Department of Transportation presented its plans for Tampa Bay Next and Pinellas County, mainly regarding express lanes on I-275. The PD&E evaluation is looking at adding 2 express lanes in each direction from north of I-375 to south of Gandy Boulevard, and a second express lane from south of Gandy to Howard Franklin Bridge. FDOT is finalizing the reevaluation for approval at the end of the year or in early 2020. And again, we're having a great deal of public input, public comment on some of the issues relating to that plan. The board also approved 6 main legislative priorities. Support urban agriculture, protect trust funds, support flexible and sustained transportation funding, including indexing fuel taxes, use of strategic intermodal funds, system funds for transit and other arterial funds for non-capacity projects, stop distracted driving, maintain MPO authority for apportionment restructuring or structure and home support rule. Forward Pinellas is hosting a transit-oriented development knowledge exchange series, exploring the benefits and challenges of incorporated transit-oriented development in Florida on October 30th from 2 to 4 at St. Pete College. And I make one final announcement on November 12th, the Board of County Commission will continue having transportation work session. We'll have a work session on transportation issues related to funding, transportation improvements and transit plans. So there's going to be more of that discussion moving that forward. So that'll be on November 12th at 1 o'clock. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Eggers. Appreciate that. And Brad, would you handle the T-Barter meeting, please?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I'm sure I cannot do this the justice that our chair Long would have done for the exciting T-Barter meeting that was held on Friday, September 27th, here at PSTA. The governing board was presented with a $7.5 million operating budget for 2020. This is supportive of T-Barter's mission, includes resources to support the organization, the commuter services van pool program, and planning work being performed on Tampa Bay's regional transit vision. However, the board was not able to vote due to a lack of quorum. This item will be continued to the October board meeting, which is this Friday. There was a presentation from the consultant Tyndall Oliver on T-Barter's Envision 2030 plan, including Tech Memo 2 Transit Performance Overview on the regional transit network that they're developing, the upcoming MetroQuest survey supporting outreach information and next steps. And finally, Sarah Caper from our Forward Pinellas provided information to the T-Barter board about transportation disadvantage programs in our area, along with a regional project status update. The next board meeting is scheduled for this Friday, the 25th, at, it's at the Pasco County Commission offices in Pasco County. So Debbie will enjoy going up there, I'm sure. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Next on our roster is the consent agenda. Is there any item on that agenda that needs to be pulled for discussion?
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, getting ahead of myself here. All right, open up the voting, please.
We don't have it yet.
Here, it's on your sheet, but it's not on ours.
That's just the roll call.
Yeah.
Here we go.
That's roll call. There we go.
Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Okay, now we move to our action items. I'm proud to say that our PSTA staff has brought this first item to our attention. Al Burns, PSTA's procurement director for the past 2 years, has been doing an excellent job of ensuring that PSTA has one of the best procurement systems in the country. He recently discovered a problem with one of our contracts that occurred before he arrived at PSTA. And I'm not only thankful to him for alerting us to the problem, but more importantly, I'm happy he has scheduled a fix for the problem once and for all. Al?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Good morning, board members. Al Burns, Director of Procurement. Staples in the procurement department are accountability and transparency. Therefore, I felt compelled to bring this action item before you this morning. Since coming here, we've been continuously improving the procurement department, and one of those improvements has been internal audits on contracts, on monitoring the contracts. What we monitor is we monitor the expiration date of the contracts and the expenditures or money spent on those contracts. Last fiscal year, in one of those audits, it was discovered that the Cummins contract was overspent due to input errors in prior years. Once discovered, no additional engines have been procured. Staff is currently working on a new solicitation upon approval of this ratification for for an engine contract. This morning, I bring before you the action item to approve increasing the value of the Cummins Inc. engine contract in the amount of $489,670 for a new value of $1,589,670.
Thank you, Al, for that overview. And I guess I'd like to ask if there's any questions from the board. Yes, Commissioner Barkley.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank Al for identifying and fixing this issue. And on behalf of the PSTA Finance Committee, when we reviewed this issue, and we recommend ratification of the revised contract value. And so accordingly, I will make a motion to approve the contract revision as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Hold on, please. Commissioner Justice?
Yeah, question, a couple of questions. Just maybe you can do the overview again, because we've paid over on the contract, there was overages, but we're increasing the value of the contract?
Yes, sir. We overspent the board-approved amount by $489,000. Therefore, the ratification is to approve that expenditure.
And we've gone through and audited that the overspended was justified in spending? It was an error in calculation, or I guess that's where and then the second thing is, I didn't see this on my agenda until just now. this morning when I looked at the agenda, this action item wasn't there on my Granicus, so I don't know when it was added. But more importantly to the question about the timeline of the spending and if we spend over, so this is, I guess I'm not sure where we're at as far as.
Okay,
Al can explain this, but basically what happened was additional engine purchases were made in accordance with the ongoing contract, and Al's organization picked up the fact that they had gone over and above the allotted amount on those engine purchases.
During the course of the contract, we returned the engines to the manufacturer, and those are called cores. We did not reconcile the cores properly in the beginning, during the course of the contract. So there was a mistake issuing the core credits, and there was an additional amount put onto the contract. That additional amount, and that's what the $489,000 comes from. It was an error that was done because we didn't have a proper understanding of the contract at that time. That's the reason where I'm recommending that we we stop using this current contract and go out with a new contract that the new procurement staff is fully aware of, and all those core credits and different miscellaneous items are accounted for properly in the new contract.
Brad?
I can try to provide some additional information. First, on the agenda item, this was presented to the Finance Committee and was on our consent agenda until yesterday, last evening, when Commissioner Cox, who sits on the Finance Committee, suggested that it be placed on the action items for discussion. So that's why it just showed up.
Okay.
And just moments after Commissioner Cox called me, I called Al and said, be ready. Second, again, this contract was approved by the PSTA board back in 2016 after a competitive procurement for engines. And it's a 5-year contract, and at the time was not to exceed $1.1 million. So it went along just nicely, and then as Al's describing, when the old engine that you take out of a bus, you can get a credit for part of it. And that was, the math on that was being improperly credited back to this value of the contract. So it seemed like there was more money left in it under the board's authorization than there really was. And then when Al came, he discovered this. He suspended the contract. We haven't bought any engines since he discovered it. And so, but these engines are already in the buses. We've already paid Cummins per their competitive price for those engines. And so now the plan is to do a new procurement, just get a new contract.
So the engines that we've purchased under this were more engines than we thought we were going to be buying.
Correct, sir.
Correct.
Correct. But, so we were kind of front-loading engine purchases from a future fiscal year? Would that be accurate?
I would probably characterize it as this, sir. We don't have any engines in stock right now. So it's not like we have an abundance of engines in our inventory. As of yesterday, I spoke to the deputy director and the director of maintenance, and we have 0 engines in our inventory. So it's not like we're, for lack of better terms.
No, I'm not so much the actual physical engine as much as the allocation of the dollars, I guess, is what I'm thinking about. If we
In our annual budget, there is a budget line for engines and transmissions. So it was a budgeted line item in our operating budget.
One moment, please. Debbie, could you please come up maybe and shed some further light for Commissioner Justice's benefit and that of the board? Thank you. Sorry, Al.
Thank you very much for the question. In fact, exactly what you're saying is what happened. Over the 5-year contract, instead of buying engines, let's say, evenly over the 5 years, we did buy more of them up front because they went into the rebuilds of some of our buses. So we did have a campaign to do engines and transmissions early on in the contract. And as Mr. Burns said, because of the way the data was entered in by the staff at that time, it made it appear as if we had a lot of money left over, when in fact, we did not. Did that answer the question, Commissioner?
That's helpful, and I assume that we've put in the procedures now that we won't be making a $500,000.
Absolutely.
If I may say, sir, Al has done a great job, and I hate to bring, some of these things to the board, but I'm also very proud of the fact the staff has taken ownership of everything and has gone through, and they're still going through item by item, contract by contract, and coming up with these things, and we really did feel in the spirit of transparency to bring this forward.
Hence the reason why we do these audits, to ensure, you can just never, ever be too precise, and it's very difficult to go back in the future and make up for things that happened in the past. So we're trying to correct the situation and move forward. Anything else? Commissioner Justice? Anybody else from the Finance Committee? Commissioner?
yeah.
Hold on. Commissioner Eggers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think a couple of the last comments, when I hit the button, they hadn't been made yet, but I really do want to focus on the fact that what transpired is unacceptable. And but what was really great was the effort that was made to discover the problem and to then own the problem. I think that's refreshing. But again, I think there's some things in place that won't allow this to happen again. And I think those are all extremely important points. And Al, I wanted to, again, tip my hat to you for doing that kind of internal audit to find it, but also to bring it forward. Because I know it's not comfortable topic, especially for somebody in purchasing to have to deal with this. But it is something that we have to deal with and make it right and move on. And hopefully that mistake won't be made again. So thank you.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Eggers.
Thank you. Commissioner Schulman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question and a comment. The first question is, had it been accounted for properly, and we'd gotten to the 1.1 million contract ending dollar value with time still remaining on the contract, what would have been the process at that point to authorize more purchases? Would it have just been a comeback to the board for an increase in that contract? Would it have gone back out for competitive bid? What would have been the normal way of handling that?
The normal way that we would have handled that is I would have conferred with my peer, the Director of Maintenance, Henry Lukasik, and we would have did a market analysis to see if the pricing is competitive, and together we would have mutually made a decision on whether or not to either come to the board and ask for more money to be added to the contract, or either to go out like on a competitive solicitation for a new contract, like you stated, sir.
Okay, so we've already determined, as you said, that the prices that we were continuing to pay under that contract remain competitive.
Yes, sir.
Even though we went over. So you would have come back to us at that time and said, we need $500,000 more on this contract for these engine replacements, hypothetically.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I think the other thing that was important for me on the Finance Committee was understanding that these were expensed in the years that the replacements occurred. They were competitive in price. They were the same price we were agreeing to pay prior to reaching the cap. So it's not like we now have a $500,000 expense that we need to account for. It's already been baked into prior year numbers.
That is
So I thought
absolutely
was
correct.
important as well. And again, to reiterate what Commissioner Eggers said, these are the things that we need to know about and need to come forward, and your work in that area is much appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Schulman.
Thank you. Commissioner Barkley?
I would just like to again echo what people have said, that this was caught and corrected, and we appreciate the fact that you're doing a great job of taking care of these kinds of things. And just assure not only the board, but the public in general, that we're doing everything to make sure that everything is corrected and correct.
Yes.
Thank you, Al.
Thank you. Any further questions or thoughts from the board? Anybody? Anyone from the public have any comments, questions, or thoughts? Seeing none, I do believe we have a motion and a second. Would you please open the voting card?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Al. moving on to 6B and the replacement of our trolley bus purchase, I would ask you to pay attention to Brad and staff as they go through this. It has a few little twists and complications in it, so for the purpose of our public and those in the audience, it's important to pay attention, follow along. Brad?
Okay. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning.
So this is finally an action item today to replace PSTA's oldest buses in our fleet, which this year happen to be trolley buses. This is something that PSTA does each and every year. It's something that our board, those of the board members that are relatively new, might learn that this is something we talk about a lot at our board meetings about the buses that we are replacing in our 210 bus fleet. However, this purchase has been slightly delayed for a couple months. I think for some really good discussions that Commissioner Eggers and Commissioner Schulman asked some questions that I'm glad that they brought these up, because it's allowed us to do some in-depth analysis on some different ideas on how the trolley services are operated. You might recall, just as a background, that there is a lot of fantastic trolley services operated in Pinellas County. We actually have 6 different routes operating throughout the county, from Tarpon Springs down, at least until Sunday, Paso Grill. All over the county, trolley services are ridden in very high numbers and are very, very popular. In fact, I did some research and found out that Pinellas County has the second most number of trolley routes of any county in the United States. And I would venture Canada too, so North America. We are one of the places where trolley service is what is transit service. Only Miami-Dade has more trolley routes than Pinellas County in the U.S. So again, we've taken a pause on replacing these old buses, not necessarily related to the action of actually replacing vehicles, but for some other questions that were asked. We had an overview at our last month's board meeting, you might recall. We had an in-depth discussion at our finance committee, and the PowerPoint that was discussed there is in your packet. But I think the members of the finance committee would agree with me in saying that they probably know 100 times more about how to put together a bus, thanks to Henry Lukasik, our maintenance director, explaining these trolleys, than they did before. And that leads us to today, where we have an action item that the finance committee ultimately is recommending to replace our oldest 16 trolley buses with 20 new replacement trolley buses. So again, the two questions that Commissioner Schulman and Commissioner Eggers sort of asked that are good questions that we have done a lot of analysis on are different. I think they would agree that they sort of focus on two different things. Commissioner Schulman's question was about, wouldn't we perhaps save money if we discontinued or reduced the Central Avenue Trolley in St. Petersburg once the planned bus rapid transit opens up? And then Commissioner Eggers' question that he asked was, well, maybe the focus of PSTA shouldn't be on trolleys. Maybe PSTA should focus on other services, like bus service, regular bus services, and have Jolly Trolley or another provider provide trolley services. And so we delayed the action on this for 3 months to look at that in more detail. In the last month, we've had a lot of discussion and really good meetings related to those topics. Chief Operating Officer James Bradford and I had a really good meeting with the Jolly Trolley, who's here, their chair, Mr. Bob Clifford, and Miss Rosemary Windsor, who are back here not sitting near each other, with another board member, I believe, and talked to them about what their plans were, how their finances worked exactly, and to see if we could strike a closer partnership with them in the future. And it was actually a suggestion that Commissioner Eggers gave to me that I thought was a really good idea, that I talked to the Jolly Trolley folks about how we might embrace the partnership that's been so successful in the Clearwater area for a very, very long time with Jolly Trolley, and that we might have a longer-term relationship, maybe a 10-year contract with the Jolly Trolley once the current contract is completed. And perhaps that would be something that we would do with all of our good partners. The Looper Group down in St. Petersburg. Maybe we could have a similar longer-term arrangement, and maybe even, and I see they're here too, with our paratransit system with Care Ride. Those partnerships have been in place for a very long time. We are very, very happy with them. I believe that would help stabilize their finances on their side, and ultimately lead to possibly lower costs or maintaining of costs structure for PSTA. The other thing we talked at length about with the Jolly Trolley was, let's work together. Let's work closer together to expand these popular trolley services. Our community would like more trolley services, not less, or not just replace one driver of one trolley with another driver of another trolley. Let's expand the services and see if we can identify the resources together to build on what's been successful. We got some great news from the Looper Group. They actually lowered their price, amazingly, for next year. And we just learned that, and Debbie's very happy about that. And then we had this finance committee discussion a week ago, which that focused a lot on not only the financial implications of how we pay for contracted services, but also about the exact type of trolley bus that we're recommending to buy, a much heavier duty trolley and more expensive trolley than than the Looper or Jolly Trolley provide, because the routes are so much longer. They have so much more ridership on the Central Avenue Trolley and the Suncoast Beach Trolley. They have a lot more passengers with mobility devices and just need a much heavier duty vehicle. And we perhaps got way into that. I'm going to have Debbie now just give a little summary of the financial implications of sort of the questions that we've been pondering over the last month.
Good morning again, and thank you, Brad. Over the last 6 months, we have been talking about the budget, and really it's been over the last 2 years. We have, as a whole at PSTA, been very focused on finding ways of either increasing revenues or decreasing costs to be able to balance the operating deficits that we're projecting. So I think it was in the spirit of this that both of our commissioners here today have made suggestions that we really took a deep dive into. So if we take a look at the first bullet on here, replacing the PSTA trolleys with Jolly Trolley. Now currently, PSTA, as Brad mentioned, we operate our buses on the Central Ave and on the Suncoast Beach Trolley routes. Those service about 1.5 million rides a year, about 300% more than what Jolly Trolley and Looper together actually run. So if we were to outsource this to Jolly Trolley would have to buy additional vehicles that would be pursuant to PSTA specifications to meet the ridership demand and as well as the duty cycle demand of that. As a result, they would have to, with buying additional vehicles, pass on the cost to PSTA. Now let me remind you, the costs for Jolly Trolley are paid for out of our operating budget. So any increases in that would increase the operating deficit. So let's take a look at the second bullet point, Commissioner Schulman's proposal to buy something less than 20 vehicles. And this was based on the premise that when the BRT was live, that we would have a diminished need, probably a greater diminished need, for vehicles on the Central Avenue. Now, we've taken that into consideration in determining how many vehicles we need to actually replace. However, I think one of the things that I reflected on since the Finance Committee meeting is that when you put it in perspective, as of today, we have 118 vehicles in our fleet that are life expired based on mileage, which is based on the FTA, or Federal Transit Administration standard. So we have a need for vehicles. Matter of fact, I thought about it and I said, you know, PSTA is very much like that character in Popeye. The character that just has a voracious appetite for burgers and doesn't ever pay for them. That's PSTA. We not only have an appetite, but a great need for buses, and we don't pay for them. FTA does, and they do so out of their capital grants. So the idea of reducing the number of buses that we buy today really doesn't help us, because I can't use those federal capital dollars to help reduce the operating deficit. So I think while both concepts were very thoughtful and really gave us some good food for thought here, not a hamburger thought, but good food for thought, they both increase our operating deficit. And I think we can all agree the whole goal here, as we look forward, is to close that gap and balance the operating budget. I'll turn it back.
Thank you, Debbie.
Yeah. And then just a couple more points.
Hold on, please, Brad. Commissioner Gerard.
The FTA funds that you're talking about can only be used for capital?
These funds are only on the capital side.
And can they only be used for trolleys?
No, they could be
regular
used for other
buses?
capital items as well. But I cannot move that money into the operating budget.
But they can buy regular buses?
Oh, they can buy any kind of vehicle, yes.
Okay. Commissioner Barkley?
Yeah, my light went off, I guess. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. After a detailed staff presentation and a long discussion at the PSTA Finance Committee meeting last week, as Brad has alluded to, the committee voted 3-2 in favor of recommending the purchase of 20 replacement trolley buses at a cost not to exceed $9.7 million. And on behalf of the Finance Committee, I'd like to make a motion to approve this item as presented.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Barkley. That said, I do believe we are still on the presentation, correct, Brad?
We are.
Okay, hold on, please. Commissioner Eggers.
Debbie, on the purchase, the FTA purchase, how many buses are we allowed to purchase per year with FTA?
We can buy as many as we can afford to buy. And based on our replacement plan, normally we buy 8 to 10 buses a year. Based on what we get in our capital grant funds, that's what we can afford. As I mentioned, I think it was, I don't know when it was, but a number of years ago, we purchased about 90-some buses, all in one shot when we got a large grant in. If we ever get a large grant like that again, we'll be spacing it out over time, so we don't have this issue of having a significant number of our assets life expired.
And just a clarification on that, you said that's all we can afford, but they pay for all the buses. So what do you
Right, but
mean
we
by
only
that?
get a limited number of federal grant dollars per year.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
So that amount limits us to that 8 to 10 purchases.
Right, currently, right now, we have the funding available to buy all 20 vehicles.
So that's over a 2-year period.
It's over a 2-year period simply because of the delivery time of the vehicles. And right now, it looks like it's, once they go into production, we'll have all vehicles within 3 months.
So the opportunity cost, as it relates to the next question that I have, is really about focusing our purchases over the next 2 years on the trolleys versus they could be on buses that we also need. You said 118 that have
Right.
expired.
Right, we also have some other buses coming in. Those will be our electric buses.
But that's not the numbers that we're talking
No.
about here. So we could use the funds on regular buses as opposed to the trolleys, even though these represent the oldest. If they were going to be replaced by another organization, we wouldn't have to worry about those. We could use them on buses. The other thing I had, you said is increase in operating costs. What is that increase on that 80, I think it was $80 and something. What would it be per bus that we add, that they would purchase? How would that affect that rate? I mean, if we're talking about an increase in operating cost, are we going from 80/20 to 80/21? Are we going from 80/20
I'm sure it'd be a
to-
lot more significant than that. It would depend on how they would finance the purchase of their vehicles. If they purchase them outright, they would not probably be charging us interest. If they go ahead and lease the vehicles or go through a financial institution to buy the vehicles, those costs would have to be put on top of that. And it would depend on the length of the term of the loan
So
agreement.
we don't really have an idea right now what that amount.
No, but I'm sure it would be significant.
$10? I mean, $5? I just trying to get a sense of what we're talking about. And we haven't had that conversation with.
No,
Okay.
we have not had that
Thank you.
conversation.
That's all I had.
So, at this point in the conversation, I would just like to remind you that if we were to decide that we were not going to purchase the trolleys and we would turn that over to Jolly Trolley, please tell me if I'm wrong, Debbie or Brad, Jolly Trolley is not able to access the federal funds. Therefore, they would be on their own, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that is outside the parameters of our partnership that we have with Jolly Trolley. One of the advantages is that we do have the opportunity to pull down those federal dollars on behalf of Jolly Trolley. So I think that's an important consideration that we need to think about as we move forward, and tell me if I'm wrong in that thought process.
Well, I think you're generally correct, although this is all sort of speculation because we would have to have a negotiation. This would be a new contract arrangement with a provider, a partner of ours, that we certainly haven't negotiated that. It would be subject to negotiation. The fact of the matter is that more trolleys would be needed by them to expand their services. And so the only way that they'll have to pay for those in some way. I mean, the proposal to have a longer-term relationship with them, a longer-term contract, would allows both of us to spread fixed capital costs that they might have over a longer period of time. I mean, that's my hope, is that our contractual rate per hour will not go up as much when we do expand, because they'll be able to spread that over more hours, to your question about how much more. But that hasn't been discussed yet.
And so then, given that we had to renegotiate a new contract, does that mean that puts us back in the RFP process again, correct? Like we went through a couple of years ago, or whenever that was?
Well, I'm suggesting perhaps.
The attorney is saying yes. Okay.
Our attorney is saying yes.
That's all I needed to know for that.
Okay.
Thank you. I do believe that Commissioner Barkley is next in the queue. And then Commissioner.
No, I already spoke.
Oh, you did? Well, then turn off your light, please. Commissioner Schulman.
Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of different things to break down in this conversation. First off, to Commissioner Egger's point, when we were discussing this at the Finance Committee meeting, we could not get a concrete answer on what part of the current $80 cost is for Jolly Trolley's capital purchases of buses in the past. So we don't know if that number includes that at all. We presume it does, but we don't know. That's correct? Or has that changed?
Again, it's a contract rate per hour of service. I think the chairman of the Jolly Trolley Board conjectured at the Finance Committee, if I recall, that 5% or so of that $80 rate is for capital, but it's not necessarily something that PSTA has ever asked or knows, right?
And I understand, and I don't have a problem with us not knowing, but not knowing then leads to the second part of what we're talking about, which is Jolly Trolley also has the ability to charter their service and have private use of their trolleys, and that is another revenue source that they use to purchase vehicles and other operating items that they have. So there is a scenario, and we don't know because we haven't negotiated this, but there is a scenario where those costs for capital purchases get pushed to Jolly Trolley, where they're able to use revenue from other sources that they're able to obtain, thereby freeing up more of our FTA funds internally for other bus purchases, thereby allowing us to have more newer buses in total across the entire service, partly through Jolly Trolley and partly through our own purchases. So that is a plausible scenario. Whether it's actually realistic, I don't know. There's
It's
negotiations that
plausible,
we need to
just in my opinion, and having worked and the meeting with Jolly Trolley, it seems unlikely. It seems unlikely. Yes, they do have a charter operation that currently is enough to allow them to replace 2 of their trolleys per year today. They already operate a service, a very great service that PSTA pays for today. And they can supplement maybe 5% of the $80 that we pay, plus charter revenues to buy 2 trolleys. But what we're talking about is expanding that by 10 more overnight. And we don't believe that and they haven't said to us that they can expand their charter revenues by that much so that we can get 10 trolleys for free. That's just unlikely.
No,
Okay, hold on, please. There are other people that would like to have a word. Okay, Commissioner Gerard.
Okay. Well, this may just be a matter of presentation, but when I look at this slide that talks about the operating expenses, and it says that that the Jolly Trolley folds the capital purchase into their operating expenses. We do not. Right. We keep them completely separate. I mean, on the surface, and somehow you'll have to explain this to me, theirs would be very comparable to ours, even including the operating, or even including the capital purchases. And I know we haven't talked to them about future purchases and maybe, I mean, I would like to see us also talk to them about the whole issue of expanding the system. Do we know that they're not capable of doing that? Have we asked them?
Yes.
Because it seems to me, well, we have asked them then.
Yes, well, we've had an extensive discussion about their ability to expand, and they do certainly have an interest in expanding and growing their system and being a great partner to us. Not necessarily taking over services that we operate. I don't think that's their intent. About expanding and providing more service to places like Bel Air Bluffs and on the North Coastal Route up to Tarpon Springs. I mean, I think that's definitely their goal, and an incremental expansion over time that we can budget for and manage with hopefully some extra charter revenues and maybe a longer-term agreement so that the hit is not so significant to PSTA's cost per hour in 1 year is something I think that's what I'm recommending we do, is work with them to expand their service. But on an incremental basis, not replace existing services.
That's not an answer to my question, though. If their cost per hour is $80 and ours is almost $79, how is it that they're actually doing it cheaper than we are, given that they have folded the capital expenditures in there? I mean, that's what I would like to have an explanation of.
Commissioner Gerard, from what we heard, and I'm not going to hold the chair of Jolly Trolley to a number, we asked him at a last minute thing, but if 5% of that $80 is going towards capital, number one, we don't have any of they have 2 new vehicles, those are not on our routes. So they do need to set aside money to buy vehicles. They have a budget that's probably somewhere between an operating budget of $2 to $3 million. They are getting charter revenues in that can certainly help, but we would be asking them then to have a lift of $9.7 million within probably a year's time frame to be able to handle this. Are they capable of doing it? I can't answer that, but I think it's a huge lift. And we would like to do this so it's in partnership, so it's not painful on their side, so that they can grow and grow a little bit at a time and be able to run the routes that they have really a great niche in here in Pinellas County.
Okay, well, again, that's kind of a presentation thing, because I didn't get the information I needed. But I think the chair would like to make a comment.
Well, I had a couple more slides if the board,
Please go through your slides, Brad.
thank you. Speaking to the question that Commissioner Eggers asked about whether or not there's some sort of lack of focus or an ability to have trolleys be focused on by one entity while PSTA focuses on other things, the bus system. I think that's a little bit of a misunderstanding about how much the Jolly Trolley services, the Looper services in St. Petersburg, Care Ride, the contracted transit services in Pinellas County are fully embedded into the transportation services that PSTA operates as well. In fact, I would venture that because the services are so popular, they have so high ridership, that on an hourly basis, PSTA probably spends more time working on our contracted services, these trolley services, than we do most of our other services we operate. James Bradford is our Chief Operating Officer, and he is responsible at PSTA for the oversight of the day-to-day oversight of both the Jolly Trolley, the Looper services, and Care Ride paratransit services. Debbie Leas, of course, is our finance director, and she is paying the bills and making sure that they get paid every 2 weeks for the services they provide. And Jolly Trolley and Care Ride come to our offices, come to Debbie's office, and make sure that the bill is being paid. Cassandra Borchers, our Chief Development Officer, she is responsible for generating all the revenue. We have more than 10 cities and the county providing additional revenue to pay for these great trolley services, and she's out and about meeting with city councils, talking to them about how their services is funded. Then I've listed a lot of other people that you probably don't know all of them, but our scheduling department, led by Christine McFadden, she is developing all the schedules that they operate along Clearwater Beach or in downtown St. Petersburg on the Looper. Julie Lupus and Spressa, they are taking in all the revenues. All the farebox revenue that we receive comes into PSTA, and we count and account for that funding. Of course, Whitney Fox is Director of Marketing and Communications. We put out the information about the schedules and promote the service on behalf of our contractors. So the idea that we wouldn't have to worry about it, that it would just go away, is not really, it's just not really accurate. It is so important. These services are what PSTA does, and we're very, very proud of the contracts. My last point. This was the community survey that we presented to you a little bit last month, but I thought this question was interesting. And a phone survey done in August of just an open question. What are some of the things that come to mind when you think of PSTA? Ask citizens, non-riders in Pinellas County, just what comes to mind when you hear PSTA? The number one answer was pretty accurate. Public transit is a good answer, I would say. And then number two was trolley services. That's what people think of. PSTA is the trolley. They love it no matter where it is, or no matter who runs it, or what it's called. They don't even know what it's called. They know that it is a transit service that when they're on vacation, they like to ride. So with that, again, the recommendation before the board today is to replace PSTA's oldest buses in our fleet, 20 trolleys, trolley buses. Number two, work together, not for a reduction in trolley services, but an expansion of trolley services, perhaps to Bel Air Bluffs. That's been the number one request for a long time. And then also to increase the frequency on the North Coastal route to Tarpon Springs. And then three, long-term contracts to reflect the nature of these really good partnerships that we've been able to establish. I think if we had that longer-term relationship locked in, that will ultimately lead to lower costs, or at least not dramatically escalating costs, and help PSTA manage its budgets into the future. So with that, glad to take any more questions, or we can hear from the public.
Okay, thank you, Brad, and thank you, Debbie, very much. Now, there are several folks, board members in the queue. Commissioner Rice.
Thank you, Chair. So to go back to the original question that started this conversation, I believe is whether or not the Central Avenue BRT would somehow take away from the Central Avenue Trolley, or it would somehow be redundant services, correct? So, I mean, I see the two services as being very distinct. Bus rapid transit is rapid transit on a different corridor. Central Avenue Trolley is a little bit slower, more geared towards tourists. There's a lot more stops. But the current fare for the Central Avenue Trolley is $2.25, correct? Correct. If Jolly Trolley, a private charter company, were to take over the Central Avenue Trolley, that fare would be $5 for an unlimited pass?
No, it would still follow PSTA's fare policy. It would be
Okay.
$2.25.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was a little concerned about that because it seems like, especially based on the year of data that we've seen with the success of the Downtown Looper, and that is a very successful partnership between the City of St. Pete, PSTA, and the Downtown Partnership. We redid the routes and the stops. They're actually put together by planners instead of the old inherited subscription service. The service is free, and our ridership just, I mean, it just went through the ceiling. It's very, very successful. And if anything, I see the future success for the Central Avenue Trolley would be somehow to build those kind of similar partnerships and to offer that kind of high frequency, free service that goes up and down Central Avenue. And I just right now don't see how we do that working with a private charter company that just has different financial requirements and maybe a different mission than we do.
Thank you, Commissioner Wright. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Commissioner Schulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did want to go into a little bit more detail on the Central Avenue Trolley changes in my mind. And I appreciate, I received some ridership data from staff earlier this week. And so just thinking through behavior and how people are currently using the Central Avenue Trolley, most of the stops, most of the usage are east of 34th Street. That's where we have the most significant usage. And keeping in mind our budgetary constraints, our need to decrease operating costs in the future, we're running those buses then from 34th all the way out to the beaches, which is now being truncated again because of changes with St. Pete Beach. So the service is changing. So I went and looked at the data that was provided, which was the average weekly ridership from February to June. That was what was given to me, and presumed that people would be willing to walk 2 streets, one way or the other, to get to the BRT, which is going to be running on 15-minute intervals for a longer period of time with traffic signal priority so that people can move around versus the Central Avenue Trolley, which is changing to a 20-minute time frame with frequent stops. If we did that and kept a truncated Central Avenue service that went from downtown to 34th or to Grand Central, somewhere in that area, and people were willing to walk 2 streets to the current BRT stop locations, we'd be servicing 90% of current ridership. I think it was like 89.81 going one way and 90.18 going the other way. That's a significant amount of riders being served, where we can also reduce the cost then of operating those lines, decreasing the maintenance costs, fuel costs, everything that goes into that stretch when we need to reduce our operating expenses. So for me, that's where this all started. Are we going to have these trolleys? We're buying 4 extra ones for increased service and rotation needs. So we're already going to have 4 extra. did we need to have as many, given the fact that I think behavior will be that people will want to be on the more frequent, more predictable, more rapid service that we're promoting in that stretch from 34th out to the beach. And the fact that we're going to need to save funds. Now, whether those funds can then be repurposed to expand service to Bel Air Beach, North County, other areas, that's for a different conversation. So one of the things that was also said in our finance committee meeting by Henry was, you know, that we look to buy the right vehicle for the right application. Because the point was made, you know, if we don't need these trolleys, they'll be moved to other places in the bus service. But these would not be the buses we would be buying for other areas of service. They're not our traditional buses. They're diesel. They're not diesel hybrid. We've had to move towards that. So my view was not committing to buying this, since we won't be getting the delivery of these second group of buses until the BRT is basically up and running. Right? So it's not helping us in the interim, is not committing to it now, but waiting to see how that service may change. And not having trolley buses that wind up being used elsewhere in the service that wouldn't be the buses we would buy. That was the thrust of it. And I was actually, like I said, I appreciate the data. I was shocked to find out that 90% of ridership would still be served in looking at those numbers. Again, presuming that people would be willing to walk a street or two to get to the station. So,
Thank you,
those
Mr.
are-
Schulman,
thank you.
very much. Commissioner Justice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess it seems like we're kind of negotiating against the air right now, because do we have a proposal from the private providers? Have they solicited to do any of these things? I guess I just don't know where the impetus is, or these conversations that I assume some of our board members are having with Jolly Trolley or the providers that others aren't, to know where we got to this point in the discussion and I look at it as any other route. You know, we're looking at 1.6 million riders on the trolleys we service versus several 100,000 for the private providers. Do we want to see if someone wants to take over Route 73 too? Or, I mean, I guess I just don't know where we got to this point in the conversation with privatizing the trolley services.
Is there an answer for that, Mr. Miller?
Well, I think there has been some discussions. There was an email from a Jolly Trolley board member that we talked about at last board meeting, where the email suggested that they would take over the PSTA trolley operations that PSTA employees are operating today, and would not require the purchase of these trolleys. But we've had a lot of discussions with the Jolly Trolley about that suggestion. I don't think that was a proposal. That was not a formal proposal by the Jolly Trolley. I wouldn't characterize it as that. But that's what got these discussions started about whether somehow we could get free trolleys out of some other way of operating the service. And I just don't, I can't stand here and believe that we can get that after talking at length with the Jolly Trolley.
Commissioner
But
Gerard, hold on, Commissioner Gerard.
expanding the trolley service incrementally seems much more viable.
Commissioner Gerard?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. How many stops are we going to have on the BRT between downtown and, say, going onto the beach? I mean, it's
16?
16. So that's one every, how many blocks do you think? Like 1 a mile? That's a long way to walk to a bus stop, let me tell you.
It is.
Especially when it's
I can
hot.
say that. The other thing, excuse me, just to go back, because it's driving me crazy, the operating cost thing, and Debbie can probably answer this. When you say that the PSTA operating cost is $79, does that include those things that Brad was talking about before, like marketing and scheduling and planning? And I mean, does it include all that overhead?
No, that's part of the fixed cost. That's $78 and change. That's our incremental cost for adding additional service.
So what would you say are, well, this may be an unfair question, or administrative costs is for all that other stuff?
So if you put it all together, a fully loaded cost, and I'll look to Michael's, like 90 some dollars? A little over 100 for 2020?
Okay, so like 20, okay.
Yeah, so for us, we wouldn't be adding, additional personnel when we add additional service.
Right, but that is part of the true cost, so.
But that is part of
Okay.
it.
Gotcha.
Is that the end of your questions?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Henderson, I see you came up to the front row here. Is there something you would like to share for the good of everyone's decision-making process here?
Yes. Hi, Phil Henderson, 2173 Louisa Drive, Bellear Beach, Florida. I'm the president and CEO of Starlight Cruises. I've been in Pinellas County for 37 years. I serve on a few different boards. Most of you know me from the TDC board, commissioners, and most of you know me on that board as a numbers guy. Well, I also serve on the Jolly Trolley board as their treasurer. And I've got no skin in the game other than just trying to do the right thing for the greater good. To answer your question regarding capital, the $80, our chairman, Bob Clifford, was pretty on target there. It's about 4 or 5%. The rest of it comes from our other ancillary revenue sources, which mainly is the charter service. If we were to take this on, back up. There's not been a formal proposal. I did send that email suggesting that, hey, you may want to look at this. They operate very efficiently, pretty much the same as far as I'm concerned. But we don't require a grant to purchase vehicles because we have the ability to do other forms of revenue production. So I sent that saying this is probably the better thing to look at, expand the service. We went through the RFP process already. Found that Jolly Trolley was in fact the most efficient operator and is doing a great job with it. The proposal would be to expand the service down the beach to do what Jolly Trolley does best, and that's move coastal residents and tourists up and down the beaches in a fun way. Transportainment, you've heard me say that before, or Commissioner Long has. And we're not looking to move inland, we're not looking to take over PSTA. It's just that if you were to expand the service that we're already providing in North County all the way down to beaches, it would be consistent, parallel, the same type of service. Jolly Trolley would become more efficient through economies of scale. And how would we pay for it? We would have to go borrow the money. We'd have to have a long-term commitment from PSTA and a long-term contract of probably 10 years or more to be able to go to a revenue source and borrow the money. And then our charter service would be paying that debt service along with a small portion of what PSTA pays us. You can take that $9.6 million and put it somewhere else in a hybrid proposition.
Mr. Henderson, I have a question for you.
Sure.
I hear what you're saying, and please tell me if I'm wrong here. I hear what you're saying. At this point, we have had several conversations at the board level about this issue. And what I think I just heard you say clearly is, we do not have a written proposal from Jolly Trolley. Do we? Yes or no?
We do not.
What?
No, we have not given
Okay.
you a written proposal, no.
My second question is, does Jolly Trolley have its own maintenance facility?
Yes,
You do.
yes, and we're looking to move into a larger one. That has not been solidified yet, though.
Okay, well then I would like to suggest that the folks from Jolly Trolley and Brad and the finance people continue their conversations, work on a proposal that is in writing, that we clearly have an opportunity to discuss with all these questions answered, and then we can take it up again and be in a stronger position to address it. Right now, as I think Commissioner Justice said, we're really negotiating in the air because there's a lot of what-ifs, there's a lot of unknown issues. I have heard from staff here at PSTA that we spend a lot of time working on maintenance and procuring parts on behalf of Jolly Trolley. If that's the fact, then I also would like to know who is picking up the maintenance piece. And if we're talking about a 10-year contract, I'm not sure legally if we can do that, Madam Attorney, but I think there's a lot of questions that we need to ask and get solidified before we sit here in a board meeting and try to negotiate in a board meeting.
I agree 100%.
Does that sound fair?
Yes, and that's what my letter, or what my email was, suggesting that, why don't you take a look at this?
Well,
We have
I
not,
hear
we
you.
have not been given the data. We cannot give you a proposal without knowing what the parameters are gonna be exactly. You know, what are the miles, the hours you're gonna be requiring? You know, we know how many vehicles, but, you know, if you want an hourly rate, then we need to know what that is. And if you want us to give us, and if you're gonna require an RFP after we give you a rate, then here's the number to beat.
Well, correct, but I also got a nod from the attorney here that said, going outside of this contract, we are required to put out an RFP. Is that correct?
Should I press this?
Yes.
Yes, so the action item before us today would be the purchase of these new buses, and these 20 new buses would certainly be over the amount per percent of Florida statutes and internal PSTA rules and regulations that would have to go out for competitive procurement procedures.
Okay, well, we're not asking you to provide those buses to us. We're asking you to extend the contract we already have. We've already proven that Jolly Trolley is the most efficient operator of those that responded to the last RFP. Because we're nonprofit. We're not trying to make money. We're trying to provide a service for the greater good. And like I said, I'm only here because I'm concerned about doing the right thing. You know, it's not a profit thing. So I think your money would be better spent, that capital money, in other areas of PST. That's all we're saying. But if you're going to, I don't think it has to be, I'm not an attorney, but I think you can expand the contract you have. If we have one more route, I mean, the looper gets redone, right, without a contract. So, I mean, that's all we're saying. If you're willing to do this without an RFP, then give us the stats that you need, and we'll respond with a rate. And I think it's going to be very close to what we're charging now.
We are not allowed to do that, Mr. Henderson.
Okay.
We're going to have to go out on an RFP.
Then we can't, we can't go out there and say, okay, here's the number to beat, and we're going to go through all this, and somebody's going to come in 5 cents less, and they're going to win the contract.
Okay,
If they can. You know.
Again, respectfully, I am going to ask that the finance people and the Jolly Trolley people get together and figure this out. We are not prepared to do it here today. Mr. Cox, do you have?
Yeah, I just had a comment. In our finance meeting, we did learn that some of these vehicles are pretty beat up, and they're past their useful life too. So I believe there is a need for some replacement of vehicles too.
So let's get back, thank you, Mr. Henderson.
Okay, well, like I said, it's kind of an impasse. If you want an
Okay,
RFP, then.
Hold on, we have an action item in front of us right now that is pertinent to PSTA. And I do believe we do have a motion and a second, don't we? I don't have a second. Oh, you don't? Okay, we do have a motion and a second. And I do see that we have Mr. Henderson up again for last comments, please. We are on our action item, not on Jolly Trolley specifically.
Spoke.
Okay, all right. Well, do we have
Ditto,
further
same thing.
conversation, board members? Yes. Commissioner, can you please hit your button, Madam Attorney? Commissioner Schulman,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
on the item in front of us, please.
I understand. One quick comment, just with the mile difference between bus stops on the BRT, that's only a half-mile walk. To eat either one, you wouldn't be right next to one and walk a mile the other way. I understand that. Just wanted to make sure we understood the math on that.
Okay.
The other issue with the item today, I think what it points out is that we don't necessarily need to engage in a contract to purchase 20 buses where the second delivery of 10 buses won't be until 2 years from now, right? So we're hearing that there's conversation, we're hearing that there's work that needs to be done, we're hearing that there might be some differences in opinion on how we move forward on this. And so committing to buy the full 20 over a 2-year delivery period is what I'm seeking to change. And let's get our buses that we need in the contract for next year, not for 2 years.
Thank you, Mr. Schulman. We have a motion and a second, and the conversation now is on the motion. Commissioner Gerard.
Yes, one question and a comment. How many total trolleys do we have?
Commissioner Miller.
Today PSTA has 16.
Okay.
16.
So if we bought these buses, and as I'm going to suggest, we talk to, well, not just Jolly Trolley, but we take a look at having trolley service contracted out for the rest of the beach. Not necessarily all the other things we do. We can still use those buses someplace else. If we're not providing that trolley service ourselves, we're on the beach, we're still gonna use those trolleys someplace else.
Well, definitely, we could definitely use this trolley somewhere else.
I mean,
Depending on the discussions, we could arrange an RFP even. I mean, other cities have done this where vehicles that PSTA's done this in the past, where we buy the vehicles and then we have an agreement where the contractor runs them, you know? So there's lots of
Yeah, I was gonna
different
ask about that, I didn't wanna complicate things.
options. I mean,
They're complicated
there's lots of
enough.
options out there.
Okay, well, I will be in favor of purchasing these buses today and continuing, unfortunately, this conversation unrelated to buying the buses.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Gerard. Commissioner Justice?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And actually, that's kind of where I was going, and my thought was, if we're able to procure the trolleys today, that if we have a fruitful conversation with Jolly Trolley or another vendor, that there was a way to shift the physical asset to that private, and do that through the financing and through the contract. So, which you've just indicated is a possibility. If we have that conversation, which I think is a worthy, I mean, they've been a wonderful partner with us all these years.
Yeah.
And certainly those are conversations we should have.
Thank you, Commissioner Justice. Commissioner Barkley?
Madam Chair, I would just suggest that if we're going to have these kind of conversations, they be above board, they be open, they be fully publicized, and no internal one-on-ones with vendors with regard to this when we're not talking about this in our specific presentation or voting.
Well, I do believe that is the law, Commissioner Barkley. Commissioner Eggers?
That was all I was gonna say. It is a law that when you're in contract negotiations, that you don't have conversations, so. It has nothing to do with contract negotiations, however.
Correct. Okay. Oh, sorry. All right, so are we in a posture now to take our vote? I believe we have a motion and a second. Could you please open, and the motion is to purchase the 20 replacement trolley buses, correct? Okay, everybody understands. All right, please open the voting card. Thank you. Okay, and the motion passes.
You can't abstain unless there's a conflict of interest.
Was there somebody?
What? Okay, with the motion,
Excuse me, point of order. People can't abstain unless there's a conflict of interest.
There's nobody is.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. I take that back.
all right, we're good. The motion passes. Thank you very much. And now we are on 6C. Mr. Abhishek Dayal, please.
Morning, Madam Chair, board members. Abhishek Dayal, Director of Project Management Office. And this item in front of you is actually an action item. It's a two-part action item for the Central Avenue Bus Rapid Transit Project. As we continue to ramp up our design, and we hope to have that completed by the end of this year, we're also working with FTA on meeting certain other requirements as part of the grant agreement. And one of those requirements is to have all the third-party agreements completed prior to FTA executing a grant agreement. So the item today is essentially two agreements, one with City of St. Petersburg, and then the other one is a memorandum of understanding and a resolution with Florida Department of Transportation regarding the Central Avenue BRT. So the first agreement with City of St. Petersburg was actually approved by City Council last week unanimously, and essentially lays out roles and responsibilities with regards to design, construction, operations, and maintenance of the Central Avenue BRT project. It also sets aside a certain budget for City of St. Pete staff to provide assistance for the different elements of the project, including right-of-way acquisition assistance. And the budget set aside for that is not to exceed amount of $254,000. Now, the second item, which is the Memorandum of Understanding with Florida Department of Transportation, is more narrowly focused to providing the right-of-way assistance for the project. And this would be for portions of the project that is within the FDOT jurisdiction. And for that, there is a set aside for $300,000 for easement assistance. Both the $254,000 for the St. Pete assistance and $300,000 for the FDOT assistance are all included in the overall project budget. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions on this item.
Questions, members? Anyone? Commissioner Justice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What do we anticipate being the need for acquisition of private property on the route?
So we are actually just anticipating some easements, just so we can accommodate bus shelters or stations that we typically require. Most of the easement assistance will likely be in portions where there's very limited right-of-way, particularly on Gulf Boulevard and Pasadena Avenue. So we're still trying to identify those specific needs, but we wanted to set aside a certain budget to accommodate that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rice.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment that PSTA and Abhishek gave this presentation to St. Pete City Council last week, and it was a really good presentation, received well, and strongly supported with a unanimous vote from City Council, as well as having the support of the administration.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Good news. Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So this $554,000 was that estimated at the beginning of the project as well? This is an additional cost. This is cost that we're providing to these organizations.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And what was the estimate at the beginning of the project?
We had estimated a certain amount that we actually at the beginning of the design, we had not estimated any right-of-way acquisition. But over time, as our design progressed, we estimated a certain need for easement to accommodate the station. So that has been developed over time.
And this is not part of the increased design cost that we voted on last month or the month before?
No, sir, no.
So this is another unexpected expense. So I just think we have to be very careful, and I understand that some of this doesn't get identified, but if you're not anticipating some of this stuff, then we can't understand what the real costs are going into a project. So to me, it's very normal to expect some of this.
Well,
it's just
to that point, we did anticipate having contingencies, so that's why we incorporated contingencies so that as we advance the design and if there is a need for easement acquisition, then that contingency could be drawn from to accommodate that without causing an increase in
the overage
project
on the
budget.
design and the overage on this overage, so to speak, on this can be cleaned up, if you will, by the contingency that we have.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Cox.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And Abhishek, the understanding that the stations will be able to accommodate the articulating buses if we do get those in the future, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So it'll be 60 feet. How large is the station?
The station is about 60 feet platform size, and then you include a certain distance for the ramps so that people can get up to the 14-inch platform. So overall, it'll be about 85 feet
Okay, so we
long.
budgeted for that then.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else? Commissioner Eggers, did you have further?
Nope. Thank you.
Anyone?
Move approval?
We have a motion and a second. I'm sorry? Oh, the attorney would like to read the title into the record. Please continue.
Resolution number 19-08, a resolution of Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority PSTA Board of Directors authorizing execution of a memorandum of understanding with Florida Department of Transportation, FDOT, for easement acquisition, authorizing FDOT to act on behalf of PSTA in the acquisition of easements for public transportation purposes necessary for completion of the BRT project, providing an effective date.
Thank you, Madam Attorney. So we have a motion and a second. Would you please open the card for voting? And that passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Yeah. Yes. Turn on your.
Request, yes.
Yeah.
If we could maybe get a sense of what that contingency amount was and kind of an ongoing report of what we've been putting against that.
Absolutely.
That would be helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, and now we are on our last action item of the day, which is the 2020 legislative priorities. Mr. Miller.
Okay. So this is an action item that we do every single year where we adopt legislative priorities both for the state of Florida, the state legislative session, which will start in January, and the federal fiscal year 2020, which not necessarily that Washington DC follows such a strict timeline because they're still talking about continuing resolutions, we understand. These recommendations are recommended by the PSTA Legislative Committee, which just met on Monday. This year, like in the last couple of years, we've developed some concepts. We've had some discussions about what might be on our legislative agenda, and then had meetings with our state legislative delegation from Pinellas County here while they're in Pinellas. And we had several of those meetings with state representatives and senators. I've had those meetings over the last couple of months before bringing these two lists, which are in your packet. I'll quickly, I'll first talk about the state list and then the federal. So our recommended list for 2020 for the state legislative agenda priorities basically covers two different areas: transportation disadvantage funding and electric bus infrastructure funding. There's two items on transportation disadvantage funding. First, PSTA, Pinellas County, like every county, receives transportation disadvantage funding based on a formula that has been debated over the years. The elements of that formula are based on the number of low-income or people with disabilities that are resident in every county, as well as just the overall population of the county. And that often has become a debate between the urban versus rural counties of the state. And there's a debate between, well, most transportation disadvantaged people live in the urbanized counties, but there are fewer transportation services in the rural counties. So the rurals sort of cry that they need the money, and the urban say, well, we have all the people, so, and then that debate just continues. There was a study done by Cutter, University of South Florida, 2 years ago that recommended changes to the formula that benefited PSTA and urbanized counties. And that was included, that new formula was included in proviso language, which means that the state legislature has to vote on it every single year. And then this last 2019 session, the legislature didn't vote on it. So it reverted back to the old formula, the quote-unquote pro-rural formula. So agenda recommendation number one is PSTA obviously would benefit if we went back to the proviso language formula. And the Commission for Transportation Disadvantage is actually looking at indoctrinating the new formula into a Florida statute rather than keep going through this proviso process each and every year. We heard from our legislative advocates that there's discussions about this and overall funding for transportation disadvantage going on right now. And so I think it's important that we include this on our list of priorities. Same thing with transportation, TD late shift, Uber, continued allowing for mobility enhancement grants to be, to fund innovative programs like our very successful TD late shift program here in Pinellas. That's on our list. Then two kind of I think these are more stretch goals of creating a fund at the state level for electric bus infrastructure. There is a fund, or there has been a fund, for natural gas vehicles that cities and transit systems have applied for to get funding for natural gas vehicles. And so the suggestion, and we've spoken to Senator Brandis about this, is about creating a similar program for electric vehicles, and he is contemplating or working on an electric vehicle bill. There's an item to have the legislature support allocating funding of the VW settlement funds for electric vehicles, including some to Pinellas County. And then the fifth item on our list is a Medicaid-related item related to ensuring that we have access to database, or we're able to get reimbursed for trips that we're providing on our DART paratransit that should or are eligible to be reimbursed by Medicaid. And that requires state legislative action. Or maybe not legislative action, but at least administrative action. So that is our list of state priorities. Before I move to the federal, is there any questions or thoughts on the state list? Okay. On the federal list, again, our number one priority, which has been pretty consistent, is specific funding, grant funding, for the Central Avenue BRT project. And we're making great progress in that. We had several good meetings in Washington, D.C. on that project. Number two on the list is related to appropriations. Appropriations is the annual process the Congress goes through. Authorization of different programs happens about every 5 or 6 years and is sort of more of the policy that Congress follows. Appropriations is the money. And this year, the 2020 appropriations, which hasn't been approved by Congress, even though theoretically the fiscal year started on October 1st, they're under a continuing resolution till right before Thanksgiving, and then we heard on the phone on Monday they're probably going to do another continuing resolution to Christmas, and then keep on going, maybe have a government shutdown. But the transportation bill has appropriations, and we want to maintain the existing, at least the 2019 levels of appropriations in 2020. Number three then speaks to authorization. That's the thing that happens every 5 years or so. That's coming up due at the end of this fiscal year. And there's a goal, probably most of you know, that the Highway Trust Fund, which provides transit and highway funding, is not solvent. Gas tax revenues are not growing, and expenses for roads and transit and everything are growing. And it's been getting supplemental funds from the U.S. General Fund for about more than a decade now. So that now most highway and transit projects are funded actually by just regular general fund and not by the gas tax. And so that is a major hurdle for the Congress to tackle. There's a policy that we think can be resolved in the authorization policy, which is number 4, which is counting rides in this new era of mobility, like PSTA has done on different kinds of services like TNCs or taxis that connect to transit services. And our programs with Uber and Lyft are models for the whole industry. But those rides that are on those vehicles are not counted. If we provided a bus or a trolley bus and we provided that trip, it would be counted. But just because it's in an Uber car, it doesn't count, because the formula that was created by Congress back in 1980 something, Uber wasn't even a word. So our goal is to modernize some of those that language. And then last on our list for the federal is something suggested by our lobbyist Harry Glenn, is to have Congress establish a regulatory process for autonomous vehicle bus pilot programs. There is no there is no established regulations on autonomous vehicles, just like things are a little bit outdated at the federal level. They're trying, the Congress has been trying to come up with regulations because of some very well-publicized problems that autonomous vehicles have had where they've run over people, etc., and have not proven to be particularly safe. Congress has put a hold on every permit, every pilot for now 6 to 9 months. They've just recently started releasing some permits, but not to actually carry people. Gainesville, Florida has, at the University of Florida campus, has had a proposed pilot for a long time. They got a permit just about a month ago to test it, empty. It can go back and forth, but it does not have a permit to carry people. And we've got some pilot programs that are also held up in this process. Harry Glenn has really been working a lot with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and others on this issue. So that's on our list of things. So the next step, once the board approves of these priorities, is then we will change them from these beautiful Brad created Microsoft Word black and white to marketing created one-pagers that tell the story in a much better way with pictures. And then we work with our government affairs professionals to develop a strategy on how we can actually make progress on these issues. That includes trips to Tallahassee and Washington, D.C. That we do each year with board members hopefully joining me, as well as meetings locally with the delegation, and then other activities, meetings with state officials when they're in town. A whole strategy is developed around at the state level and the federal level. So thanks to the folks that sit on the legislative committee for helping with this, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Questions? Anyone? Okay, thank you very much. So may I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the 2020 legislative priorities that Brad Miller just presented.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Thank you. Please open the voting card. Excellent, that passes.
Please add me as a yes.
Great.
Okay. All right, now, Brad, do you have any updates that you would like to make us aware of?
I'll just highlight some things that are at your places. First, thank you for those of you who have already RSVP'd, but I welcome any of you to join us at our Leadership PSTA graduation ceremony coming up on November 1st. That's next Friday. And second, as was mentioned earlier, we're having another Feeding Tampa Bay food pantry event here at PSTA on December 3rd. That's before our next board meeting. Here at PSTA, it's really a great event, as you saw. And then last but not least, I just want to remind folks, I think many of you have already gotten information to Rachel, but our nominating committee meeting will be held on, I think it's a Thursday, November 14th. And what the nominating committee will do is recommend the officers for next year that will take on the chair, vice chair, and secretary treasurer as of January 1st. And they'll also make recommendations on committee assignments. So if you are on a committee that you don't like and would like to serve in some other capacity, let Rachel know that. Or if you want to be on a committee, let her know that. Or if you just want to stay on a committee, that's good too. Thank you for your service. That will be voted on, that will be on our agenda for the December meeting, then for the full board to vote on those recommendations by the nominating committee. So November 14th is your drop deadline for stating your piece on any committee assignments. That concludes my report.
All right, is there any other business from any of the board members? Anyone? No? All right. Any board member comments? Anybody? Some of you have been very silent today. All right, then, for the good of the order, we are adjourned.
In the trolley.
How are you?
I am Joe.
He doesn't want to give up on that.
Kind of makes it